take Cam Ward off the board for the Cleveland Browns. He's going to the Titans. We'll talk about it coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Dog Pound? I'm Spencer Sherman, your host of the Locked On Browns podcast. I'm proudly covering your Cleveland Browns each and every single day in the land and on the road. Cam Ward is the Tennessee Titan. It's official as of Monday. We'll talk about it. Also, a recent Shedeur Sanders mock draft trend that just makes absolutely no sense to me, and an important Kirk Cousins update that could leave the Browns at a crossroads if they want him to be their quarterback. I do want to thank you for being an everydayer with the Locked On Browns podcast, making us your first listen every single day. Remember, you can find Cleveland Browns content with Locked On Browns every week, Monday through Friday, guaranteed, with bonus content on some weekends as well, and it's totally free to you. All you got to do, hit that subscribe button, wherever it is that you listen to your podcast, and of course, at the Locked On Browns YouTube channel, where you can also get involved in the show by sharing your thoughts on anything we discussed today in the comment section. This is your team, so be part of the conversation every single day. Yes, it is official. We can etch it in stone. Cam Ward's going to the Titans. He is a Tennessee Titan in for all intents and purposes as of yesterday, 1 month out officially from the NFL draft. We now know where the Titans are going to go at number one, and the Browns in that regard are kind of on the clock. The Titans literally had everybody imaginable in attendance for Cam Ward's pro day on Monday in Coral Gables, Florida. Brian Callahan, head coach, was there. Mike Borgonzi, GM, was there. Team president Burke Nihill was there. They might as well have brought Dolly Parton, Nashville's own, to be in attendance for this event, because they were basically signaling to everybody, yeah, this is our guy. They had a conversation. It was shown on TV with Cam Ward afterwards. He made some comments to them about, I'm putting in stone today. Like, this is going to be me. I'm going to be the number one pick. It seems like everything is coming together here, adding up to Cam Ward being selected number one overall. On top of that contingent of people that was there, or the higher ups that were there, there was also a good report from Zach Jackson of The Athletic that the Titans' in-house TV and website production teams were also in attendance for his pro day, which means they're starting to build content around Cam Ward, which, again, is a pretty telling thing. This was the Titans signaling that they know who they're going with number one overall, and that it's Cam Ward. And that means he's not going to be an option for the Cleveland Browns at number two when they're on the clock in a little less than a month now, April 24th, when the first round gets going. They will not have a chance to even select Cam Ward, which is disappointing because, yes, I believe that Cam Ward's the best talent in this class from a quarterback standpoint, and you at least wanted the Browns to get a chance to draft him. I've been saying for a while, like, I would love it if both quarterbacks were there too, because then we would know the Browns' true thoughts and evaluations on these guys, because they would basically have to give you an answer by picking one over the other. So I wanted to sort of have that be the scenario that played out. And I've been saying for a while, I think Cam Ward's the better talent of the two that we're talking about at the top here, between him and Shedeur Sanders. And so I think there's this great high ceiling for him to potentially hit, where he becomes a great quarterback at the next level. And he looked fantastic in his pro day. He was slinging it. I know it's a throwing with guys against air. So it's only so much, but we know what his tape shows as well. And I believe Cam Ward's going to be a great player in the NFL, and the Titans are going to have the chance to get him, and the Browns won't. And that doesn't mean, like, I do think the Browns have been genuinely interested in Cam Ward. I think they've been interested in both the guys at the top of this class. I think they've been interested in a number of the quarterbacks that are in this class, and they're going to consider and weigh all their options. Andrew Berry's certainly trying to leave no stone unturned when it comes to figuring out which of these quarterbacks he really wants the most. I think there are some people trying to read into the Browns didn't have nearly as large of a contingent of people in attendance for Cam Ward's pro day as the Titans did, even with the number 2 pick and being that high on there, because from all accounts, it was mostly it was Glenn Cook, the team's assistant GM, who was there, and Chris Buford, who's a national scout for the Browns, who also was present for the event. And I know people are trying to use that as a reasoning of like, okay, well, they're not drafting Cam Ward, or they have no interest in Cam Ward. They don't like him or whatever. I don't see it as that. Listen, like the Browns have done most of their evaluation at this point. They know what they see in Cam Ward. They know what the tape says. I'm assuming they know what they're getting in him already. They've met with him at the combine. They met with him at the team facility. He came for a visit at the team facility. So I think them having a lesser group of people, or not as quite of a parade of people like the Titans did, is more so about like probably realizing the reality of the situation. I think it's a little bit understanding the Titans are probably going to take him. I also think it's them understanding they're already comfortable with Cam Ward, and that this was just kind of like a fact finding or a confirmation style appearance where it's like, okay, let's see what he does in his pro day, but we already sort of know what he brings to the table. Let's not just spend a ton of resources to send everybody down there when we know, like, if he's there, maybe we would take him, but he's probably not going to be there anyway. That's the way I viewed it. And I think that's kind of the way it should be interpreted. I don't know that this is an opportunity to do like victory laps around the Browns of like, why wouldn't you be at this quarterback's pro day or have more of a presence at this quarterback's pro day? I know there's been a lot said about Kevin Stefanski being more involved in this process. He was at the Senior Bowl really for one of the first times since he's been in Cleveland, and whatnot. So, him not being there, I think sort of caught people's attention when he's trying to sort of get a better grip on the quarterback situation in general this offseason. But again, I just think it's the part of the process we're at. The Titans are there because they're sort of trying to cement, yeah, you're our guy. And the Giants doing the same sort of thing. Like they want to assess everything, knowing like if any of these guys don't go one or two, maybe they swoop in and take them. But like I think this, to me, it just feels like the Browns are comfortable with who Cam Ward was and is as a player, and they didn't need to have everybody there in attendance to see it live in person because they probably felt comfortable with him regardless. That's again my perspective on it. I wouldn't read too much into that, but I would certainly read into what the Titans rolled out to be there, the caravan of people in attendance. And so now it becomes about the Browns pivoting to, what their plans are at number 2 overall. If Cam Ward's not there, is he the only quarterback that they really thought was worthy of going that high? So does that leave them now going with Abdul Carter, as has been mocked in some recent mock drafts from some of these top analysts out there? Does Shedeur Sanders still do it for them? Is that a guy who they still feel comfortable with taking that high? Or are they in the camp of these teams that maybe feel like he's not worth that high of a pick and they don't want to take him that high? Those are the things they're sort of ironing out, finalizing, figuring out over the course of the next month. As I've said numerous times, I'm comfortable with either because I think both can be successful in the NFL for different reasons. Cam Ward because of the immense talent that he is. Shedeur Sanders because he's got maybe not quite as much talent as Cam, but I think he's got the intangibles and I think he's got the want to be great. And I think he's going to work his ass off, frankly, to become a great player in the NFL, following his father's footsteps. And I think he can take to coaching and develop and get better in certain areas that people maybe have questions about. So I'm good with either. If it was up to me for the Browns, yeah, Cam Ward's going to be off the board, but I would still pull the trigger on Shedeur Sanders. But as I said yesterday too, if they were to take Abdul Carter, I would get it. It's an immense talent. You can't pass that up. And it would sort of tell us they're more comfortable waiting on to get a quarterback like maybe Jackson Dart or Jalen Milroe and sort of letting that guy develop or one of those guys develop over, Shedeur Sanders at 2 and using that pick at that spot. So, it sets the stage now where the Browns are sort of the team everyone's going to be looking at. Like, what is their move? And they sort of have the chips in front of them, the cards in front of them to pull the trigger on one of these top guys. And they're sort of going to set the tone for the rest of the draft. Because if they take a quarterback, a team like the Giants have to figure out what they're doing. They take Abdul Carter, then it becomes, when does Shedeur Sanders go? Does he really slide deeper into the first round like I had in my mock draft yesterday? Or does he stay in the top 10 and somebody swoops in and grabs him? That'll remain to be seen. But for all intents and purposes, the Browns are on the clock because I feel pretty comfortable saying after yesterday, Cam Ward's pro day, he's going to the Titans. Speaking of Shedeur Sanders, by the way, There's a recent mock draft trend in regards to Shedeur that I'm super annoyed with. And there's one anti-Shedeur Sanders argument that I just cannot continue to let be a thing. We'll dispel that coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you a chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories, and even who is cutting down the nets. Maybe your bracket feels like it's a little busted after the opening weekend of the tournament. No worries. FanDuel has plenty of ways to earn back the money that you might have spent on a friend's bracket pool and a chance to win even bigger if you hit on some picks. I've talked about Maryland already. They had a pretty epic win over Colorado State on Sunday. I think they could be poised to go a little further here. In the end, though, I think Florida has a good chance of winning it all. I picked them. And I think there's some other good one seeds, including Duke, who I know people are high on with Cooper Flagg, who have a chance to obviously go and hoist the championship trophy. The FanDuel app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. No waiting around. So visit FanDuel.com to get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. All right, so let's just do this again. All right, so in the vein of talking about Cam Ward going one and the Browns now getting a chance to consider Shedeur Sanders and if he's worthy of the number 2 pick in their eyes, there is a recent mock draft trend that is driving me absolutely insane. And I'm going to cite Mel Kiper as one of the people who did this last week because his take was unique in that he went on ESPN on, I think it was, Get Up or whatever. And he basically explained to everybody why he has Shedeur Sanders as quarterback 1 in this class. That was his take. Better than Cam Ward. He thinks he's going to be great. He's been high on him since last year. He's felt this way since last year, and it's only, how he played his senior year only reaffirmed his stance on that. So he believes Shedeur Sanders is QB1 in his eyes. And then in his recent mock draft, though, despite saying that, he had, I think Cam Ward went 1 to the Titans. And then at 2, he had the Browns taking Advil Carter. And then he had Shedeur Sanders going 3 to the Giants. And listen, I understand, like there's a level here of people are going to use the information they have. And maybe the information they're getting from the Browns is they're not as high on Shedeur Sanders as has been suggested or that they've maybe led on with some of the flirtations that have gone on out there. So, okay, fine. Maybe there's an understanding that that's how they feel. But if you're going to go on ESPN and tell everybody that you think Shedeur Sanders is quarterback 1 in this class, how do you then have the team that's picking second, who is in desperate need of a quarterback, and that is clearly their biggest need, haven't been able to get that position right for years. The Deshaun Watson thing's been a disaster, and they need that position filled. How are you going to have them passing on that quarterback that's still available after the first pick goes off the board? That just makes no sense to me. None whatsoever that would be the way that you set this up. And he's not the only person to do this. I think Daniel Jeremiah did it. And I'm not like singling these guys out because they know nothing and they're idiots or anything. I'm not trying to say that. Like, I know they're going off of information that they have. I know they're going off of like certain fits and things. And if maybe they believe the Browns are going to pass on a quarterback at 2 and not take Shedeur Sanders. And I can respect that if that's how they feel. But I just don't get where, like, if it's one thing if Shedeur doesn't go at 2 and then he like drops out of the top 10 or something. But if he's good enough to go at 3, he's good enough to go at 2 also. Like both those teams, the Browns and the Giants, are quarterback needy teams. And I've been saying for a long time now, Shedeur fits Kevin Stefanski's system. He's accurate. He can process well. Like, I think he would do very, very well in Stefanski's offense. I wholeheartedly believe that. In the same way, I think, Cam is going to be great for certain reasons. I think Shedeur can be great for his own reasons and some of the things that he brings to the table. So I don't understand how anybody who is talking through these drafts and then has Shedeur Sanders going 3rd wouldn't consider him going 2nd to the Browns. And maybe it's just changing it up for the sake of changing it up because these mock drafts can get so benign if you do the same thing over and over again. But if he's good enough to go at 3, he's certainly good enough to go at 2. And so that's not like all these people who are like, how is he sliding down draft boards? Is he really going to drop that far? And then they have him going 3 overall. Like, that's not like a slide. Like, I don't understand. If he's good enough to go 3, then like that tells you all you need to know. He can be a top 5 quarterback, or he can be a top 5 pick in this draft, and no one should bat an eye, because clearly somebody, based on what these analysts are telling you, values him at that level. And I don't see how the Browns couldn't. So it's just been perplexing to me. I don't understand it. And then there's another part of this too, and I've had this in my mentions a couple times. As I've talked about Shedeur Sanders and how I love just the way he the confidence that he exudes. And I know that there's a fine line between confidence and cockiness, or confidence and arrogance. And I think, to some people he toes that line and sometimes crosses it into the arrogance side of it. And my question's been all along, like, well, where have you been? I mean, he's Deion Sanders' son. It's kind of par for the course that he's going to come in with this confidence and this vibrato about him that you just kind of live with. And I think it's a unique thing that makes him set up for success in the pros, and particularly in a place like Cleveland, where it's been a quarterback graveyard here for so many decades now. Like, I think he's a perfect fit in that way. But there's in talking about Shedeur and my belief in him, people have jumped in and said they've used this argument, this anti-Shedeur argument, where they try to say that when he's raising up programs, which he's emphasized that a lot. He did it at Jackson State. He did that at Colorado. They point to, well, it's not like he was, raising these programs up that high. He was doing it at a lower level and making them like, okay. First of all, he made the Sanders together made Jackson State like they were winning. Like they were winning everything HBCUs can win. Like they were a premier program for that level, and they brought them to prominence with the way that they were doing things, and with Shedeur at the helm of that. And then they go to Colorado, which, let's face it, Colorado was arguably the worst, like, Power 5 team program in college football. And they got them to a level where, like, they were even in the playoff conversation at points last year, up until the very end when they sort of collapsed a little bit, and made a bowl game. Like, in 2 years, he helped take that program to a bowl game. I don't understand how you can knock him for being part of, like, inferior teams and only raising them to a certain level. Like, you have to realize the depths that they were taking these programs from. And yeah, like, Jackson State isn't quite the Power 5s that you're playing in some of these other conferences or teams. I get that. But to still raise that program to a place where they were competing for championships at that level, like, that's not for nothing. That means something. And I could ask the same question about Cam Ward, and this isn't like to take a shot at Cam Ward. I think Cam was going to be great. But at Washington State, his first year, they went 7-6 in 2022. They were 7-6 the year before he got there. And then the year after that, his last year at Washington State before he transfers to Miami, they went 5-7. And then he goes to Miami, where he's surrounded by 5-star talent, and he puts together his best season. And Miami has a good season. They're in the playoff picture for most of the year. And then they have that loss to Syracuse that cost them in the end. But, like, I could ask the same thing. Like, well, why didn't Cam Ward help improve those programs along the way to be bowl contenders or whatever? Like, it's the same thing applies. Like, he only helped inferior programs improve slightly. That, like, where's that with Cam Ward's resume? He went to Miami, had a bunch of talent around him, and that's where he got this best performance out of him. So that could almost be a knock on him. And again, I'm not saying Cam Ward's going to be bad or suck or anything. I think he's going to be great, but you can't, like, it goes both ways here. So I can't sit here and dwell on, well, he only did it at these programs. They weren't the premier programs of college football. It's not like he took a team and won a national championship. Like, there was always going to be, like, a limit to where he was going to get these teams in a 2-year span or a short period of time. And it still is, it's not for nothing that he still accomplished that. And so people who are doubting that he could do it at the NFL level with a program or a team like the Browns or the Giants or whatever, doubt him at your own risk. Because frankly, like, I'm not using that as a reason or a knock on Shedeur that he only took certain programs of certain, call them inferior programs and raised them to a certain degree. Like, no, they turned those programs largely around. And that's impressive to me. Like, yeah, sure. Would you rather see Colorado become a powerhouse? I guess, but he was there 2 years to try to do something like that. I still think it can't be understated where Colorado was before they got there and where they are set up now as he leaves Colorado because of what he accomplished there. and what Dion's accomplishing there. So I'm not using that as an argument, and I that's annoying me as much as this mock draft trend where Shedeur goes third and the Browns pass on him, even though people are trying to like sell everybody on his stock's falling. Well, he's still going third. So clearly, if he can go third, he can go second. It's driving me nuts, and I can't do that. If there's legitimate reasons not to necessarily like Shedeur or think he's going to be great, and if you want to get to those, fine. But I'm not using these things as reasons why. That brings us to Kirk Cousins, the latest on a potential veteran target for the Browns. And even though they've been in on him, Cleveland cannot be held hostage by an aging has-been quarterback. I'll talk about it coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. So as I said, the Browns cannot be held hostage by an aging Kirk Cousins, has been Kirk Cousins, whatever you want to call it. And that's coming from somebody who's been in the camp of, I think Kirk Cousins is a good idea if they were to pursue him and if they were to add him. But there's some context there. Now I'll get to that coming up. But the first thing I want to sort of give you here is the report from Albert Breer in his Monday morning quarterback column about Kirk Cousins. This was an update on where things kind of stand with him. And he talked about how Kirk Cousins has this no trade clause. He could kind of control his own destiny if a trade was going to be consummated and decide where he's going to go and give himself a chance to start somewhere, right? That's what he wants. And so his understanding of it was, as he laid out, he would block a trade somewhere where he could start to get to a place where he could start, because chiefly to avoid the situation he found himself in last April when he was blindsided by Atlanta's decision to take Michael Penix Jr. with the 8th pick. And that could be where the draft position of the aforementioned team comes into play. Rather than taking anyone's word for it, Cousins has already signaled to teams that he would likely want to wait to see what happens over draft weekend before accepting the trade, in a way that should also work for the teams, allowing them to go through their full draft process, make the decisions on guys such as Colorado Shedeur Sanders and Ole Miss's Jackson Dart, independent of Cousins' destination. And then he also mentioned that one thing he's heard out of Cousins' camp is that he'd be amenable to working out the particulars of a trade ahead of the draft on the contingency that a team trading for him does not take one in the first round. And this is where I'm out. This is where I'm totally out on Kirk Cousins. And I'm largely out on the idea of trading for Cousins anyway, because I'm not giving up draft capital for that guy. And the whole lure and appeal to Kirk Cousins for me was, yes, the fit with Kevin Stefanski, of course, but also the fact that you were going to get him if the Falcons just cut him on the vet minimum. To me, that was like $1.2 million is classic. Like, why not take a shot, right? With the Browns and the quarterback situation they're in, where they're desperate and they just need to sort of find a way to piece this thing together the best they can. Yeah, I like the idea of Kirk Cousins for $1.2 million, but trading for him is a different conversation. So I already don't like that as is. But then you throw in the fact that, like, now he's going to try to hold you hostage. Now he's going to try to dictate like what your draft plans are potentially, because it's basically a fork in the road. The Browns may be faced here with this idea of, okay, we either go all in and trade for Kirk Cousins, give up whatever draft capital is going to be necessary to get that deal done with Atlanta, and we don't draft a quarterback at 2. That's the caveat. Okay, we'll hold off at drafting a quarterback at 2. We'll pass on somebody. We'll invest in Cousins, and we'll get a quarterback later that we can develop. That's option 1. Or you just let the Kirk Cousins dream go. You just let that thing evaporate into thin air and no one's the wiser and you move on. And if it's up to me, I'm going option 2, because I refuse to let my draft plans, or if I'm the Browns, I refuse to let my draft plans be held up or altered by a 36-year-old Kirk Cousins who obviously isn't in the prime of his career anymore, and that you don't even really know what you're going to get from him. Like, do I believe there's still something left in that tank? Sure, but for how much longer? Guy who had an Achilles tear, guy who's in the limelight of his career. Like obviously he's fading into the back part of his career. Like, you're not going to go all in on Cousins and pass on somebody that you might think is a great franchise-changing quarterback at 2 for what, 1 year of Cousins potentially, where he could be good and maybe get you to the playoffs and we'll see what happens. Like, I just can't do that. I can't let the Browns pass up the opportunity to draft somebody like Shedeur Sanders if they feel strongly that he's their guy, because well, they want Kirk Cousins and to see how that sort of pays off. I get what Kirk's trying to do. He has some leverage in the situation, I guess, because of the no trade clause. And so, yeah, he can kind of dictate where he ends up when all things are said and done. But if he doesn't want to come to Cleveland and compete with a potential quarterback that they draft in the first round, my answer is, and my response is, so be it. And honestly, like, listen, Kirk has the no trade clause, so he can do what he wants. And yeah, he can get some say in where in his final destination. Fine. But like, how does this guy think? I'm confused as to like why Kirk thinks he's so coveted that he can just like dictate all the terms of where he ends up. Like, I'm sorry, if you end up at a team that's planning on drafting somebody in the first round because they're thinking ahead to the future and they view you as kind of like, okay, yeah, you could start for us for a year or maybe two and sort of bridge the gap to this next guy. Like, so be it. Like that's where you're at in your career, my man. Like, I don't know what to tell you. So yeah, he can control it to an extent and more power to him to do so. Flex those muscles that you have, I suppose, so that you end up in the most advantageous spot for yourself. And yeah, like, any player should do that. He's right in trying to control the situation the best he can. But is there a guarantee that he comes out of the draft? That these teams come out of the draft and that there's like a place where he's just resoundingly going to start? Because frankly, like, after the draft, his value could be even less if teams now have drafted quarterbacks and they're like, all right, now our quarterback room is set. So sorry, Kirk, we're not really interested. And that probably then leads to the Falcons just hanging on to him until August and seeing if there's some team that gets desperate because they lose a quarterback in preseason or something like that, and they got to make a trade for him. That could be what sort of the fallout is of that. So, like, fine, you can control it for now. But at the end of the day, like, beggars can't be choosers here. Like, you're sort of stuck in the situation that you're in. Maybe if you had been cut and then you were going to go play somewhere else, you'd have more control over, like, I'm going to go here versus I'm going to go here. But like, you like to dictate how teams are going to like, it's not like these teams are waiting around for and like trying to court, prime Patrick Mahomes or something. It's not like Patrick Mahomes is out here like, well, if you draft a quarterback, I'm not going there. Like, he's a free agent right now out on the market or something like that. Like, this is Kirk Cousins at the age of 36. Like, you don't really get to control that situation and tell teams like, no, you can't take a quarterback in the first round. Like, please, come on. If I'm the Browns, I am not letting Kirk Cousins hold hostage what I'm trying to do this offseason, what my draft plans are. If they want Shedeur Sanders at 2, they need to take Shedeur Sanders at 2 and not let their pursuits of Kirk Cousins or potential pursuits of Kirk Cousins after the draft influence that at all. You take Shedeur, you live with the consequences. If that means you miss out on Kirk Cousins after the draft and you can't get a trade done because of it, fine. I'm comfortable with that. I think Browns fans should be comfortable with that. And I think the Browns as a franchise should be comfortable with that. And that might just be the route you have to take. Because I'm sorry, if we were to find out that the Browns pass on somebody like Shedeur too, who they loved or liked or thought was going to be pretty good, and they did it because they knew they had a trade potentially waiting for Kirk Cousins, and they promised them they wouldn't take a quarterback, no, that's not a good way to do business. You can't be held hostage by aging quarterbacks. Sorry, not going to let it happen. Another episode down with you, Dog Pound. Thank you for joining me as always to talk about your favorite football team. There's certainly more to come this week, including if Shedeur isn't the guy at 2 and the Browns pass, who do you take at quarterback moving forward? Or really, if no quarterback at 2, who are you taking? And the best and worst case scenario for the Browns quarterback room, ways that the room could sort of sort itself out or play itself out. Like, what trio of guys would you like the most, or quartet of guys would you like the most? What group of guys would you hate the most, like would be the worst case scenario for the Browns quarterback room? We'll talk about those things coming up. So make sure you hit that subscribe button and make sure Locked On Browns is your first listen every single day. For your second listen, check out Locked On NFL Draft, or you can keep it local. Check out Locked On Cavs, Locked On Guardians. Thanks for being an everydayer with the Locked On Podcast Network. I will talk to you again real soon, Cleveland. Peace.